Welcome to our study today, Spiritism Inspiring Lives. All of us who are learners, students, about the message of Jesus, or guide, or master, or brother. Let's unite our hearts and minds and together pray as we start our meeting with a prayer. And we ask Thais to do the prayer for us today.
Dear Lord, beloved Jesus, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here today, once more to learn, to reflect, to expand our conscience, to learn today about the law of freedom, and to reflect upon these laws in our lives, in our attitudes, in our behaviors. We thank you, the Spirit's benefactors, that had been here before us, preparing this ambient, preparing this study. We thank you, our guardian, spiritual guardians, for all your love and patience towards us. And we ask for help in this study today. Help us with the understanding of these teachings, with our reflections, inspiring us so we can help each other. This way, I ask permission to start this meeting. So be it.
So be it. May everyone feel welcome, ourselves and all of those in spirit who are also with us in this unique and special moment in our existences where we are able to reflect about the universal laws, God's laws, which also helps us to understand that we all are immortal beings. And today our theme within Spiritism Inspiring Lives is the law of freedom. Let's see as we go through in these couple of moments in our reflections, which everyone is welcome also to participate through the chats, if you can understand a bit more about what freedom means to us from a spiritual perspective, from a transpersonal reality, according to the laws of the theory of reincarnation. So we have Thais raised some questions. We have Severina, which is presenting the questions to us, and then Thais will go through and expanding them for us. So let's start, Severina, please.
Okay, the first question is, what is freedom according to Spiritism, and can we enjoy absolute freedom?
So, as Eunice explained, so in this chapter, Allan Kardec developed some queries about the law of freedom and talks about the natural freedom, the freedom of conscience and free will. So through the questions, we will be trying to expand a little bit about all of these. And so what is freedom according to Spiritism? So in Rodolphe Caligari's book, he tells us that by nature, well, man is by nature the owner of himself, and he has the right to do whatever he deems convenient or necessary for the conservation and development of his life. So we really have, when I read that, I was asking myself, do I really have the right to do whatever is convenient to myself, whatever is necessary to conserve and to develop my life? Because what I think it might be necessary for the conservation of my life is probably very different than what Eunice thinks or Severina thinks or anyone else thinks. So then we could ask ourselves as well, when are we free? Is there absolutely freedom? And if we think about, when I was thinking about, many of us has the freedom to come and go as we please. But however, I don't feel like I'm free, even though I have the freedom to come and go wherever I want. And the reason I say that is because I still feel prisoner a lot of times, of the attachment to things, to people, to matter, prisoner of my vices as well. And examples can be, for example, jealousy, vices like some people might have the vices of drinking a lot of alcohol, drugs, sex, food. There's so many things that actually hold us from feeling free, or from having this freedom. So answering the second bit of the question, our freedom is not absolute, it's limited. The other reason is we also live in a society, and we've been all created the same. So we all are under the same laws, the same divine laws, and human laws as well. So by saying that, we need to respect each other's freedom. So my freedom will end when someone else's freedoms start. So that's another reason it's not absolutely freedom, isn't it? And I think at this point it can be quite difficult to understand where that ends and where that starts. And that's why sometimes we have trouble respecting our neighbors, and it's to find that equilibrium can be quite tricky. The other thing it made me reflect as well on this question is what happens in my life? Is it by coincidence? What is it keeping, like I said, me from my freedom? And what am I prisoner, or what am I prisoner of as well? And my responsibilities as well that I have towards the limited freedom that I have and use. So I don't know if you'd like to expand, you and Severina.
Okay. Severina, do you have any compliments?
Just what come to my mind is I think this is very close attached with the universal law of society. There's different kind of freedom as well. There is a freedom of attachment, freedom of thought, freedom from matter. But within the universal law of society, and this question which says, no, we need one another, is when the human is made in a way that it will not be able to survive on its own. It does need another human to be able to grow and evolve and survive. So just a thought.
The freedom that we still have, as you mentioned, freedom of speech, for instance, we are harming each other quite a lot through what we call freedom of speech, because we are not yet mature or awake in relation to the ethical values. So the freedom of speech, yes, it is valuable as long as we know how to respect each other. We always follow the natural laws in the universe. In that way, we are freeing ourselves and not harming ourselves and neither harming others. Because otherwise, when we follow some materialistic perspectives that I'm free to do what I want, as I said, on the planet, we can see a lot of atrocities going on with that. And that is not in accordance to God's laws. Okay, can we move on to the next one then?
Yes. The next question is, one second, stop out. Oops. Sorry. The next question. What does the Spiritism teach us when the right to freedom of others is taken away due to the society's custom? It is also acting wrongly?
So I think the spirits, the good spirits, are very straightforward when they start answering that the evil is always evil, isn't it? And it made me think as well in Matthew 7:12, when it says to do in everything we should do to others what we would like them to do to us, isn't it? And because we are still prisoners of our pride and selfishness, I think these two vices lead us a lot of times to have abusive behaviors towards others. And although this question, when it was written, I think it was very, well, not this question, but the question that was related to this was very related to slavery. And although we don't see that as much today, not in the old context of this word, but we have what we call the modern slavery, isn't it? And in that sense, the modern slavery that I'm talking about, in the sense of religion, in the sense of in our relationships, work, habit, costumes, our beliefs. So it's that when we use violence, when we manipulate people or pressure them to impose what we want or what we think it's right. So I think it's still very relevant, the spirit senses regarding to slavery and well, stopping others to this type of freedoms. And I think it's important when we study these laws that we bring these teachings to ourselves, to think about our own behavior, our values, and ask ourselves, how am I acting at work, at home, in society, in my relationship with my family, my partner, my children, my friends, whatever it is, and think about if the way that I'm acting towards others are making, if I'm taking away their freedom. And I think it can be a very delicate line, because you have to be very honest and very aware as well of God's laws to understand that you actually taking someone's freedom away by your behavior. And thinking of that as well, now it just came to my mind that by saying that, I'm not saying we shouldn't help other people, we shouldn't give advice, especially if we see that other people's behavior, beliefs are going opposite to God's laws. But it's important that we also help each other to expand each other conscience and things like that, but doing that without imposition, without violence, without manipulation, and looking at Jesus' examples. How did he bring all the moral values that he did with so much kindness, and his testimony as well? And yeah, that's what it made me think.
Yes, it's correct. And interesting how the question in the Spirit's book 830 starts, evil is always evil. And again, for me to understand what evil means, I'm in need of studying the natural laws, because otherwise I may even be practicing evil and thinking that is good. So I also need to get more engaged in the understanding of natural laws, understanding that we all have been created by God, simple and ignorant. The universal laws are written in our consciousness, and as more as we develop our self-awareness through these studies, through self-studies, through reflections, we are stimulating those values within, and we are increasing our own discernment. When we say evil is every movement which goes against the greatest law in the universe, which is love. And we still have a long journey, long way to go for us to assimilate that, because we are more in the beginning. But as long as we are ready, are studying and reflecting, and not wanting to be where we are not, but wanting and choosing to invest in the time so that we can expand our minds, and training and practicing and exercising with all the people who are around us, because all of us have plenty of opportunities. In that way, we are, let's say, becoming wiser in terms of understanding the good characters of a good person, and in that way also choosing to mold, to condition ourselves in that way for our own happiness, and also cooperating to establish happiness around us, because we become less needy, less demanding, more forgiving, more loving, and that is the way forward. Should we move on to the next one, Severina?
Yes. The next question is, What is the difference between freedom of thought and freedom of conscience?
So yes, I thought it was the same before I started studying about. So the Spirit's book Enlightenance saying that about the freedom of thought, that is true, that we enjoy unlimited freedom, isn't it? So the freedom of thought is an absolute freedom. And then again, the Spirit's book, there's a question that talks about the freedom of conscience, if it's a consequence of the freedom of thought. And the Spirit answers saying the conscience is an inner thought that belongs to persons, as do all the other thoughts. So my understanding is that freedom of conscience is limited, and is limited to where we find ourselves in our evolution, our moral progress, our moral understanding of God's laws. But at the same time, they are both correlated, the freedom of thought and the freedom of conscience. And the conscience is there to act like a break of my thoughts, that I think what I want to think, good or bad, and the conscious try to take control of that to establish the moral and ethical values. That was my understanding. And sorry.
To
Yeah?
filter?
To filter, yes, thank you. And as I progress spiritually, my conscience of good and bad also become more defined, and I'll comprehend better the divine laws. So they are also on us, isn't it? And the conscience, so this conscience will help me, like you said, to filter and help me not to practice the bad thoughts that I might still have. And the same way, the less evolved that I am, my conscience, let's say, would be in a sleeping mode, can feed bad ideas and can generate my abusive behaviors that we talked about before. And I think that's one of the main reasons that is so important for us to work hard to expand our freedom of conscience, through these type of studies, for example, that we do, to action, like to put in practice what we learn as well. Willingness is so important, and honesty, humbleness, faith, acceptance. There's so much that we need to be doing to expand our conscience, isn't it? And the other thing as well is, I think, as we progress, as we ascend, our ideas become more noble as well. Those bad thoughts become less and less, and it kind of correlates with my conscience as well. And that's when I feel that freedom, because that filter that I had before is stopping my bad thoughts if I listen to it. Anyway, it kind of, you feel prisoner of that because you want to do something, but you say, it's wrong. But as my conscience expands and as I ascend morally, my thoughts will be more correlate, will be good thoughts that correlate to my conscience as well. And then I have that feeling of not just feeling, but I become more free, isn't it?
Yes, because through self-education, we are choosing to select what we want to nourish ourselves mentally. Because our thought dynamic, it is developed gradually in using our free will. So as more as we understand the natural laws, understand ourselves, understand our powers that we bring within, we are choosing to develop our free will, and therefore choosing to educate ourselves in sustaining belief systems, which are our thoughts according to the universal laws. And in that way, naturally, we are really freeing ourselves more from ourselves. Correct. So according to our time, should we move on for the next one? Severina, please.
The next question. In relation to the free will, how can we choose to use our free will to do good if we are imperfect and full of wrong tendencies? Would we not be driven by our predispositions to misuse our free will?
So I think here, we started talking a lot about free will as well, isn't it? We've been talking about freedom of thoughts and freedom of conscience, and not using that word that much, the free will. But as you mentioned before, as well on the last question, Evanice, about the free will. So what is the free will? My understanding again is that the free will is the freedom of choice of my acts, isn't it? And then, which leads me to the questions that do we really have freedom of my acts? Can I just do whatever I want? Isn't it? And I think the straightforward answer, yes, I can do whatever I want. However, my free will is also directly linked to responsibility, isn't it?
Can I do anything what I want? I want to buy a Mercedes. Can I, in my condition?
Well, it depends. How much do you want? Some people might say, I'm going to robbery a bank and I'm going to buy a Mercedes. But then there's
no, I mean in relation to my resources.
Yeah.
Yes, I think what you're saying to is on the thought level, we can think whatever we want. It may not be expressed externally, but externally, not always we can do, because we will face their own limits, like the police, like whatever is there is the terms. So we can think whatever we want to, and whatever I think that I may be free. Quite often I'm not free, even in a thought level, because whatever my thoughts are in disagreement of the ethical values, the universal values, in reality, I'm not free. I'm enslaved by my own limited ways of thinking, which I will change as I evolve and using my own free wills and choosing freely to restructure and re-educate myself. For me, this topic is very fascinating, because as we all are coming from a very childish way of living, I'm free to do what I want, blah, 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 blah. But as more as we reflect in a loving way, we come to understand for ourselves that is not so. There is not so. We are really not free as we, in a selfish way, believe that we are. And really, we try to gradually assimilate the profound teachings that the benefactor, for instance, Emmanuel brings us and telling us that we are only free from within when we participate in actualizing our belief systems, actualizing them according to the universal values, and behaving according to that in our choices. Then we are freeing ourselves. That is the real freedom.
Yeah, I agree. But what I meant is, I might think I can do whatever I want, isn't it? But even sometimes, even if it's within my limitation and I do, and it's not right what I'm doing, is the point of responsibility that whatever I use my free will to do, if it's good or bad, I will have responsibility I'll have consequences towards what I did, isn't it? Yeah. In that sense, we might say, yes, you can do whatever you want, but remember, whatever you do, it will have consequences, isn't it?
Yes, consequences is very important for us to understand. It's not punishment, but consequences, because we are all under the law of cause and effect. So if I choose to think whatever I want to, if I choose to do whatever I want to, without responsibility, without limits, and then of course I myself will attract experiences which are guiding me towards the right pathway, and usually they are quite uncomfortable for the ego state of mind. But as more as we also understand ourselves in a loving way, whatever is uncomfortable is an inner wisdom which is showing us, so that we can re-educate ourselves right now in the present. So we get rid of this blaming system, neither want to be who we aren't, but also we don't want to carry on as we are. But once we have the feedback through our own nature that is not correct, that is not wise. And because of our timing, should we move on to the final one, Severina, please?
Okay, the final questions. Does fatalism exist? And if exists, would that take our free will?
So I'll just read the beginning there, where spirits, there was that it only exists when applied to the choice made by spirits upon incarnation to undergo this or that trial. So when I read this, my understanding is there is no fatality, there is no fatalism. If there was, that would take away my right to exercise my free will, isn't it? And so we are free in that sense to exercise our free will. Is the way that we exercise that will make us free or prisoners, as we mentioned on the previous question. There is a message that I read from Leon Diniz. I just would like to read this really quick, that he says that for us to be free, it's necessary to want this freedom through our efforts, freeing ourselves from the slavery of ignorance and passions, replacing the empire of sensations and feelings with reasoning. I just thought that in just a paragraph, he explained so well what is freedom and how can we be free, isn't it? And I'm aware of the time, but I just would like to close my comments with us to look at Jesus, isn't it? To follow Jesus and his examples and his teachings, because it's only by following him that we will find this freedom that we search for and be happy and so on, isn't it?
Yes, promoting ourselves spiritually as immortal beings as we all are, and we all have been created by God in order to reach real happiness. So it's down to us how much effort we put into now to educate ourselves, to train ourselves, to practice these methods so that we can really mature, progress, and evolve. And in that way, we are ending our study today, giving thanks to the enlightened spirits who have been with us even before we arrived, always preparing this ambient and assisted all of us throughout these reflection moments, ourselves and all of those in the spirit. And in that way, we inviting all of us to be together through our hearts and minds and end this meeting with a prayer, giving thanks to God, the creator of the universe, of everything and everyone. Our dear loving Father, who created us with love, who still loves us. Our gratitude towards our Master Jesus, our guide, our friend, our brother, who is inviting us more than 2,000 years for us to learn to love ourselves and to love each other, so that we can develop a universal fraternity amongst all of us, and in that way, freeing ourselves from the hardships in learning in a different way. We are all assisted through the law of love, which promotes and favors us all. Our gratitude for this unique and special moment in our existences, which we are so blessed in studying about Spiritism, which teaches us about the teachings of the Enlightened Spirits, which brings the message of Christ, which brings the words of God. And with our hearts full of joy, we also pray for all of those who are in suffering on earth, all of those who are ill in hospitals, in pain and despair. May they also receive our blessings of peace and love. And all of those who find themselves in despair in the world, all of those who lose everything on the physical level, we ask Jesus to embrace them all and sustain them in His Spirit, as we understand that the experiences are transitory. And may all our love go out for all of those who are in pain, all of those who are part in our family setting, wishing them peace, wishing them well. And so, thank you, dear Lord. May your peace bless us all today, tomorrow, and always. So be it. Much peace to all. Thank you for being with us, and those who want to join us later on today at 8 p.m. in our study in Portuguese. Otherwise, we will see each other here next week at 7 p.m. Much peace to all. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.